So welcome, and please be seated. So welcome to the Blauwe Zaal, to the inaugural lecture of Marcel Bogers. I always have the privilege to look at the first part of the speech of the people. So it's kind of interesting what I see and marked in yellow, as some of it is also in my speech, so you'll recognize some of it. And I had also the privilege to look at your three sons. They remind me of the three Daltons in a way. Do you remember them? Today they have such a... Anyway, but this is all about you, Marcel, your inaugural speech. And I think it's not a surprise that you've chosen at the end of the day Eindhoven as the place where you're doing your work. Because we, at least this region, I think, is really well known for its innovation, but also through collaboration. I think that is the unique feature of the Brainport region, that there's so much collaboration happening between various partners in the field. You find it a very important theme. It's actually the theme of your inaugural lecture as well. And it's also exemplified, I think, by the fact that you organize a very important conference in your field on innovation. It's the World Open Innovation Conference. You're having it at the high-tech campus, which I think is a very good place to have it. This campus is very well known for its R&D by very innovative multinationals such as Philips, NXP, and if you go a little bit further down the road, you'll meet ASM, which today I think is really an innovation powerhouse. The latter, by the way, is facing incredible growth. Today they employ about 17,000 people, and they are doubling. They're moving towards 35. And it's impressive to see, because each job that they creates an additional 2 to 3 jobs in the ecosystem that we have. So that explains a bit what's happening today in the Brainport region. It's also really an R&D intensive region. The annual budget spent on R&D today exceeds 4 billion on an annual basis. Our budget is relatively small compared to that, in all honesty. But nevertheless, I think we play a crucial role, because we are the key source of talent to this ecosystem. So even though the budget is small, the importance, I think, is key. But your premise is that collaboration is the way forward, and that is recognized, I think, by many people. But also, I think, as society, we need to collaborate. There are major challenges that we have to address. Think about sustainability, the energy transition that we have to face, basically the crisis that we have or will have in the healthcare sector, because the way we do it today is not sustainable. Water, food, you name it. We need solutions for all these challenges, and we need an innovative way of doing things. It's not just one person that can do it, it's really through collaboration. But it's also through collaboration that involves not only companies or knowledge institutes as we are, but also citizens, the governments, basically the quadruple helix, as we call it today. We're well known for the triple helix in this region, but I think we have to add citizens to it as well. I think it's one of the things that you would say as well, as far as I understand it. So today you will talk about how we can tackle these societal challenges with an open and collaborative, innovative approach. We also, I think, would like to welcome you back basically in Eindhoven, because this is where everything started, at least from the academic point of view. You were a student at the university, but you were previously also employed by the University of Southern Denmark, University of Copenhagen, so it's really a Danish link with you. And then you had a visiting position at Chalmers and the University of Trento. And today, you're still affiliated with the University of Copenhagen, but also as a Garwood Research Fellow at the University of California in Berkeley. So that must be quite a bit of traveling, I think, with that. But I can appreciate why you like to go to Berkeley. It's a good place to be at. But I'm very happy that you've chosen to work with us. This is the home base that you have. And it's not only because of your wonderful scientific results, a remarkable feat, I wasn't even aware of it, is that your work is really acclaimed by your peers, that you've been highly cited scientists for quite a number of times, which is quite a unique achievement. I think you can be proud of that, because it shows that your peers value the work that you do. But you're also a true ambassador in your field. You share your passion for your discipline with enthusiasm and energy, not just with your colleague, but you also reach out to the world, because you're a very prolific Twitterer. I don't use it, I never look at it, but lots of people do it. And even to the extent that you've been elected in the list of top professors on Twitter. So it shows that it's not just that you Twitter a lot, but also that people value what you do. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. But next to your research, you're also a passionate teacher, which is something that I value very much. This combination between science and education. At the end of the day, that's what the university is all about. And you really inspire and share your know-how with your students. At the end of the day, the students will have to make a difference in the world. They have the creativity, intellectual power, but also the grit, ultimately to find the solutions. And we need to find these solutions, and it's the young people that have to find these solutions. But it's also known that you're a really dedicated teacher because you've received the Best Teacher Award at the University of Southern Denmark, which I think is a nice achievement, but now the challenge is obviously to get it from this university as well. And as you know, every year we celebrate the best teachers that we have in the bachelor and master phase, and I think it's really wonderful. It would be wonderful if you would be one of the next recipients of that. Now, when you talk about open innovation, you also use one quote, and it's also the quote that's in the first line of, that's why I noticed it. So I will give you the first line of the talk of Marcel, because the quote that you use is, not all the smart people in the world work with us. And you use it to show that even if your organization is very innovative, there's still a lot of other people out, perhaps a lot more essentially, that you can collaborate and you can make use of it. I think they're really true words. And actually I find it that it also holds within the university as well as outside of the university. That's why we try to stimulate a lot of collaborative research within the institution. And I hope that more scientists will be aware of this situation. The others have a lot of know-how that you can use for the challenges that you're facing. And finally, I understand that Sunday is a special event as well from your Twitter account because you're running the marathon. Where do you find the time? So go for it, I would say. I'm very much looking forward to your inaugural lecture. Lots of success.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you very much for this very kind, nice introduction. Indeed, I think you'll recognize a lot of things of what I will say in my lecture as well. So that's already great to hear. So I think we're off to a good start. So thanks for that. Welcome, everyone. As the rector already said, my first slide here. Not all the smart people in the world work for us. So just think about that for a second. Not all the smart people work for your organization. In fact, most of the smart people work for someone else. This quote comes from a book called Open Innovation, which was published back in 2003 by Professor Henry Chesbrough. I actually first read the book when I was still a student here at Eindhoven University of Technology. To be very precise, I was at the time visiting Gothenburg in Sweden to work on my master thesis, which was actually very much related to this idea of open innovation, which is why it resonated so much with me, as my thesis was on the topic of the tension between knowledge sharing and protection in R&D collaborations, something I would later call the open innovation paradox. And now, indeed, to fully close the circle, I feel really proud to be presenting this inaugural lecture to you from the same room as where I originally gave my graduation speech almost 20 years ago. In my lecture today, I want to take you along my journey, starting in Eindhoven and now coming back, to better understand the mechanisms of open and collaborative innovation and why this is particularly important in the context of addressing societal challenges. It is indeed perhaps not a coincidence that I'm giving you this lecture here in Eindhoven, which is typically called the Brainport region, even sometimes referred to as the world's smartest region. You may even say it's called Brainport because of all those smart people out there who don't work for a single organization, but are in fact open for exchanging knowledge and collaborating on innovative projects. But has it always been that way? Well, there's actually an interesting history here. For example, before Philips decided to open up its research campus to other smart people not working for them, which was around the turn of the century, the entrance to get in was quite literally closed to outsiders. Then Philips decided to break down the walls and open up the fences to create more cross-fertilization of knowledge and collaboration, to create a melting pot of innovation in what we today call the high-tech campus. Or, as already mentioned before, fast forwarding to today, I guess it's fair to say that the hot company these days is indeed ASML, one of the world's leading manufacturers of chip-making equipment. On their own website, they state that their success is dependent on building an ecosystem through open innovation, which they relate to things like collaboration with their customers, relying on their supply chain, and building long-term partnerships. As these examples show, companies are developing, ecosystems are developing, and the entire world is developing. While many of these developments are for the better, I have to admit that I'm quite worried about some of the other developments, not only as an academic, but also as a citizen and as a father of 3 beautiful children. I'm quite concerned about some of the major societal challenges we are facing, such as climate change, cybersecurity, geopolitical instability, and of course we're all still suffering from the impact of the COVID pandemic. And who knows if that is actually over or not. I will be honest that I find this quite scary and worrisome. Also because when I think of the future of our children. But there's hope. Well, okay, this is maybe not exactly what it looks like. So let me explain what I mean. I think there's hope because we can see organizations taking an effort in addressing the grand challenges of our time. And the one example in this case I worked with when I was still back in Copenhagen is the Carlsberg company. And to be very clear, before I maybe get into trouble here, this example actually has very little to do with beer. The example, in fact, is a case of Carlsberg's ambition to develop a biodegradable bottle in order to contribute to the fight against climate change by creating more circular waste streams. The first interesting observation here is that Carlsberg is in fact not a bottle producer, but still had this ambition based on its long-term vision and strategy. Another interesting element here is that the governance structure of the company also played a role, as it is the Carlsberg Foundation that owns the majority shares of the company and thereby played a big role in making sustainability one of its core values. And what is also very interesting is that Flemming Bessenbacher, the former chairman of the Carlsberg Foundation, at some point actually announced at the World Economic Forum even that they wanted to develop a biodegradable beer bottle, which they would later call the green fiber bottle. But he was also clear in saying that they needed help from others, as they didn't have all the capabilities in-house to do that. Essentially realizing that not all the smart people work for them. Or perhaps, as he later put it, for the green fiber bottle, sustainability is the why, and open innovation is the how. This case study provides some valuable lessons related to individual motivation, building ecosystems, and finding the right business model, which are all topics I want to come back to throughout the rest of my lecture. While the case of the green fiber bottle shows some interesting elements related to the practice and theory of addressing societal challenges, I also want to highlight how we can, or should, work with this in our teaching, which is, after all, one of the central missions of our university. For me, this experience actually started when I was teaching innovation and entrepreneurship at the Faculty of Science at the University of Copenhagen. Because we set up our courses around the multidisciplinary profiles of our students, linking them according to their interest in the societal challenges. And this is also exactly one of the perspectives I'm trying to further develop here in Eindhoven, which should definitely be a good fit given our focus on challenge-based learning. In fact, this is something we are currently working on in our technology entrepreneurship courses on the bachelor level, so that is a very exciting opportunity in itself. And besides that, we even have a master course on open innovation. So I would say we are really trying to do our best to get our students equipped to address societal challenges through open and collaborative innovation. At the same time, in our research, the second mission of the university, there are also plenty of challenges to fully comprehend all attributes that are required for tackling grand societal challenges. If we can take the definition of grand challenges as being formulation of global problems that can be plausibly addressed through coordinated and collaborative effort, for me this logically means that open and collaborative innovation is almost by definition a necessary condition. This is also close to my own research, as I will try to elaborate on in this lecture. But it also says something about the role of the university in actually creating an impact. The third mission of our university. This is also, as we already heard from the rector, called the triple helix of university, industry, and government relationships. Or indeed, as he also referred to, we may sometimes mention the quadruple helix, which involves the public or citizens as well. The point being that we need a broad involvement from a variety of stakeholders. And this involves our universities and other research institutes as well, as we also highlighted in a recent paper that focuses on the role of technology transfer in that context. Then, zooming back in on the role of open innovation in the coordination of business and other activities in the face of societal challenges, we looked at this in another recent paper, in which we identified various tensions and trade-offs that arise in that context. First, who of you remembers the open innovation paradox that I mentioned before? Yeah? Good. Indeed. As I mentioned before, open innovation may lead to a tension between sharing knowledge with partners while simultaneously protecting it from leaking away. Sometimes open innovation may involve competitors as well, creating a tension between cooperation and competition, what we sometimes call co-opetition. More generally, open innovation may involve a tension between the value you want to create with partners who each want to capture part of that value as well. But as we also write in the paper, it's not all bad news. The point namely is that if we can identify some of the challenging tensions, it is in fact our research that shows that when done right, open innovation can combine and integrate these seemingly opposing goals. This is exactly what happened in the case of the green fiber bottle, or when companies like VDL and DSM joined forces to produce medical face masks in response to the shortages in the COVID pandemic, or when NASA collaborates with governments, companies, universities, and citizen scientists to detect and create mitigation strategies for potentially hazardous asteroids through its Asteroid Grand Challenge program. So for me, the conclusion is that when the challenges are grand, complex, and urgent, open innovation turns out to be necessary. Now I hope that I made the case for the important role of open innovation in tackling societal challenges. Let me then explain you a little bit more about what open innovation is, how it works, and where its own challenges lie. And for me, this is of course a nice opportunity to tell you a little bit more about my own research and my research agenda. So, thinking back of the fact that not all the smart people in the world work for you, what does this mean for organizations? One way we often conceptualize this is by picturing a firm's innovation process as a funnel. In the traditional funnel, firms, and other organizations for that matter, build on their own internal knowledge base to develop products and services, which they then want to bring to their customers in their market. However, open innovation is essentially about opening the boundaries of this funnel. For example, through inbound open innovation, by letting external knowledge from all those smart people out there flow in. Having had kids growing up in Denmark, one of my favorite examples became Lego, the toy company that has long embraced the development of user communities around their products. And, for example, has their own crowdsourcing platform to collect ideas for new products from all those smart people out there. Then we also have internally developed knowledge that finds its way to the outside through outbound open innovation. A well-known example here actually is also very local, namely Philips, which has traditionally been known for having a strong intellectual property portfolio. part of which could be licensed out or spun off to a new market through another company's business model. And finally, in some cases, organizations can combine inbound and outbound through coupled open innovation, which combines inflows and outflows of knowledge. Again, taking the example of Philips, at least many of the locals here will be familiar with products like the Senseo coffee machine and the air fryer, which were essentially developed through such collaborative efforts. While I have to say it's currently also very interesting to see how a company like Philips tries to reinvent itself and essentially taking open innovation to the next level by really reinventing the entire health ecosystem. Putting this all together, we can define open innovation as a distributed innovation process based on purposefully managed knowledge flows across organizational boundaries, using pecuniary and non-pecuniary mechanisms in line with the organization's business model. Now, I know this is of course a whole mouthful, so let me break it down. First of all, open innovation involves a distributed innovation process, which is just a fancy way of saying that most of the smart people work for someone else, and that knowledge for innovation can be widely distributed. Then we talk about knowledge flows across organizational boundaries that are purposefully managed, which essentially means that knowledge inflows and outflows need somehow a deliberate, managed effort, and for example are not pure spillovers that may not be captured by the company. Also, we talk about this being possible through pecuniary and non-pecuniary mechanisms, which basically means whether or not it involves a monetary exchange. In many situations, this may be the case, such as when Philips licensed out a technology. But in many other cases, there may be other benefits as well. Take the example of Lego's crowdsourcing platform. Of course, it may be an incentive for you that you can actually earn some money if your design is selected, but other people also take value out of the pride of winning, of having the winning design. Or there may even be people who are intrinsically motivated purely by enjoying the process of designing a new product. Finally, we say that all of this needs to be done in line with the organization's business model. And this is quite crucial indeed. A business model describes how an organization can create and capture value. And in the end, everything you do inside and across organizational boundaries has to be in line with that logic. And indeed, this is often where the implementation of open innovation breaks down, not the least in the face of tackling societal challenges. But how can firms actually manage such a process? To better understand how to leverage external sources of innovation, we developed a process model that helps to explain the steps that are involved in turning external knowledge into successful products and services, namely obtaining, integrating, and commercializing, combined with certain interaction mechanisms. To put it in simple terms, the first step of obtaining is about searching, filtering, and acquiring external knowledge, essentially getting stuff into the funnel, such as Lego did by crowdsourcing product designs, or as Carlsberg did by quite literally just calling for help. However, obtaining knowledge from the outside is only half the battle. The real challenge starts when you want to integrate it into your internal processes. For this, you, for example, need what we call absorptive capacity. That is, you need to have a certain level of in-house knowledge in order to understand the knowledge that's coming in from the outside. In addition, you need the right culture and mindset. While many companies actually suffer from what we call the not invented here syndrome, which is indeed a well-known phenomenon that especially highly innovative people in especially highly innovative firms tend to have a negative attitude towards external knowledge. After all, they are the ones who are supposed to come up with the great innovations, right? So just saying that you welcome external ideas is also not going to take you very far. The final step in the process model is a crucial one as well, but easier said than done, namely commercialization. Here the key issue is, as I already alluded to before, that you need the right business model to not only create, but also capture value from open innovation. So just opening your doors and waiting for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow really won't be enough. And to conclude, we should also not forget that in practice, any innovation process is not as linear as depicted in such a model. So there are always many reverse processes, interactions, feedback loops, and so on. So are you all with me so far? Yeah, good. Then, while understanding the process model is important to get a complete understanding of the mechanisms of how open innovation works in organizations, another important step we took was to consider how we should look at open innovation across different levels of analysis. This is important because open innovation at the organizational level depends on what's happening on lower levels and higher levels as well. And to accordingly sketch this open innovation research landscape, my colleague Anne-Christine Sobel and I took a pretty unique and I would say quite bold approach by engaging a team of 23 colleagues in total to jointly develop this research agenda. I have to say it was pretty crazy exercise to work together with so many people on a single paper, but I'm personally really quite proud of the end result. And in terms of openness and collaboration, of course, we showed that we practice what we preach. It did also allow us to come up with certain research categories that we linked to more specific topics. As such, these topics ranged from issues on the individual level, to the organizational level, to the ecosystem level, and to the societal level. As you may imagine, I don't really have time to walk you through all of these levels in extreme detail. But let me give you some examples from my own research, which will hopefully show you how we can work across these levels and how that ultimately contributes to our understanding of open innovation. Just to highlight one perspective we can take, I want to refer to a book on business models and cognition, which I co-edited with Robert Gallivan and my longtime friend Christian Sund. We believe it's important to look at business models from a cognition perspective because managers hold in their mind certain perceptual constructs and schemas about what their business model may be. And cognitive activity is really taking place at the individual, organizational, and inter-organizational level. In the context of open innovation, one interesting example actually comes from a chapter in the book by Mathilda Bass and Henry Chesbrough, who argue that, like the not invented here syndrome causes a negative attitude towards inbound open innovation, they argue that there can be a hesitation towards allowing unused internal ideas to go to the outside through outbound open innovation, something they call the fear of looking foolish. And this is not their picture, by the way. When we then further zoom into the individual level, we also have worked with what we call the micro-foundations of open innovation, which we in one paper framed as the human side of open innovation. In that paper, we argue that knowledge diversity of the firm's employees is positively related to open innovation on the firm level. Here we find an important role for the diversity of educational backgrounds, which has a direct relationship to firm-level openness, and also acts as a moderating variable in that diversity of work history among employees, that is the number of sectors people have worked in, only affects firm-level openness when there is also a high level of educational diversity, meaning that a workforce with a more diverse educational background can help to leverage diversity in terms of work history as well. In short, diversity among employees matters for open innovation, which is something that managers can consider when hiring or training personnel, for example. To put a bit more emphasis on the role of the managers, we looked in another paper at the moderating role of managers' experience and technical competence in generating innovative work output at the individual level. And here we find a strong effect indeed, with respect to both internal and external knowledge sources. The figure here on the right, for example, clearly shows that a manager's technical competence especially helps employees to be innovative under low levels of openness, meaning that employees can leverage low levels of openness as long as their managers have high technical competence. At the same time, the same technical competence may not be beneficial under conditions of high levels of openness among employees, meaning that the employees with a broad orientation towards external knowledge find other mechanisms to turn this into innovation. Finally, this may also highlight that under certain conditions, high levels of openness can in fact be harmful for innovation performance. Indeed, it is a very common finding in the literature that openness to external sources is good up to some point, but then its benefits decrease. This is the well-known inverted U-shape relationship. And when we looked at this in a more fine-grained way in an earlier study, it was interesting to see that this effect not only holds for product innovation, but for process innovation as well, although the decreasing returns are much stronger in the latter case. We also found that this effect not only holds for R&D, but for other functional areas as well, which has important implications as it means that open innovation can and should be supported by the entire organization. In terms of how to then manage open innovation, there are many important aspects to consider. In an earlier qualitative paper, we actually already found that innovative prototyping worked particularly well when collaboration took place across both organizational and functional boundaries and across hierarchical boundaries as well. However, in practice, we could also observe that the actual managerial involvement only took place in certain windows of opportunities, meaning that the pace of innovation is different at different levels. Another managerial consideration is how to deal with intellectual property, much in line with the open innovation paradox that I mentioned before. Here we can look, for example, at the trade-offs between in-house R&D and external technology sources, and between proprietary and non-proprietary strategy. From this, different open innovation models emerge, with each different levels of openness, ranging from what we would probably call very open, like an open source model, to a more proprietary one. One interesting example here is Tesla, which is relying on in-house R&D, but has also pledged to allow others to use their patents for free, because of the idea that this would be good for the entire system and the industry, and thereby good for Tesla as well, of course. In general, I do also believe that open innovation is becoming much more about managing entire ecosystems. Because most of the smart people work for someone else and not in a single organization. Which means that no single organization can actually tackle all the grand challenges of our time by themselves. Just consider the COVID pandemic, where I think we saw the tragic failure of the global supply chain, and where we in fact proposed a novel model that would connect all the relevant stakeholders in a more efficient and effective way, which actually requires a real multidisciplinary effort in itself. But despite some of these challenges, we could also see some interesting initiatives that really did make a difference. For example, we did a case study of the massive European hackathon EU versus Virus, where essentially crowdsourcing was used as an open innovation tool to engage more than 500 partners across 40 countries. And what we found in this paper is that successfully addressing such a grand challenge, for example, relies on combining urgent action with long-term thinking, while also needing to look beyond the usual suspects to really solve the complex problems. But coming back to the ecosystem perspective, we also saw in yet another case study that some companies take a less strategic approach in the face of the pandemic, but rather try to develop their ecosystem based on what we would call effectuation principles. For example, the company we looked at would aim at reducing cost while retaining the labor force and relocating them to other parts of the ecosystem, while also looking for weak growth signals, thereby step by step supporting its larger ecosystem. essentially building on the resources it has at hand to create new opportunities. More generally, as we indicated in yet another paper, the core of open innovation is in the end really about the ability to create an ecosystem where people, organizations, and sectors can foster co-creation. It involves business models that then dynamically transcend organizational boundaries within that ecosystem. And as such, it is important for me to see that the, as already mentioned before, entire triple helix, that is not only the companies and the universities, but also governmental institutions like the European Commission are putting so much emphasis on the development of innovation ecosystems, for which I think we are trying to set the right example here in Brainport Eindhoven. In the end, I personally believe that working in ecosystems will be the way in which we can really tackle societal challenges through open and collaborative innovation. And this brings me to the final part of the lecture, in which I would like to reflect a little bit more on my personal journey, also as a basis to hopefully give some advice to others who are on a similar path. Let me then indeed also go back to where it all started, when I was a student myself here in Eindhoven. I'm really extremely grateful for having had the opportunity to study here, and also having had the chance to spend a semester abroad in Berkeley as an exchange student already, which I can totally recommend to anyone, actually regardless of the phase of your career. Also being able to spend my final year at Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg to work on my master thesis was really a great opportunity. And I believe it really laid the foundation for my academic career. Especially my thesis supervisors, Rudy Beckers and Uwe Granstrand, played an important role in this. So I would like to thank them for that. And the fact that one of my fellow students at the time, even student assistants, Marcus Holgersson and I, are still working together, probably says enough about the basis for collaboration that was laid there. More generally, Chalmers has really always been close to my heart, and I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to come back there as a visitor several times. So, tack så mycket to everyone there for being such good friends and colleagues. But of course, when you finish your master, the real academic journey only starts, at least when you want to become a professor. My experience in Eindhoven, Berkeley, and Gothenburg definitely made me realize that I wanted to pursue a PhD and become a professor. And even though I think I had no idea what it would entail to do a PhD, and even less how important it actually was to be doing it at the right place, I consider myself extremely lucky for having been able to pursue my PhD at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, or EPFL. Of course, I want to say a big merci beaucoup to my supervisor, Dominique Forin, and in fact the entire College of Management of Technology, for creating such a rich and vibrant research climate. It is of course impossible to thank everyone individually, but let me at least thank Chris Tucci, Mark Gruber, Anu Watwa, and Stéphane Leyery for their guidance and help. One thing I actually also learned there was the importance of building a strong international network. And when I was preparing these slides, my dad actually reminded me that Dominique had in fact an interesting statement during my graduation ceremony. Namely, that not only I knew how to find my network, but that my network was even better in finding me. While I would say this is somehow an interesting lesson in itself, for me it also relates to the fact that I do what I do, not just for myself, but to create value for others as well. And then the result should be that the right people will ultimately be able to find you. And as we are closing the loop here, let me also thank Ellen Afua, not only for being a co-author on my very first publication, but especially for being such a great mentor and inspiration. At the same time, he is probably also the co-author with whom I share most rejections. But well, that is part of the game as well, of course. The important lesson is to keep believing in yourself and stay persistent, which I guess we also show as we just submitted another paper last week. Then, getting your first job after the PhD is of course an exciting moment. I remember very well that I had a couple of offers to choose from, including from some seemingly good offers from a couple of Dutch universities. And no, I will not mention any names. But I decided to go for a postdoc at the University of Southern Denmark. I think many people thought that it was quite strange to do a postdoc and not a tenure-track assistant professor position, and to do this in a multidisciplinary research center and at an admittedly not very well-known place. Although the location was really very nice. In fact, a professor from a not-to-be-named Dutch university called me to say it would be a bad idea, and that I could always work with other disciplines and companies later. Even though I understand where he was coming from, I really decided to follow my instinct and choose the offer that I thought would allow me to develop in the way that would suit me best and in an environment that I found exciting. Well, I guess it all turned out all right, so I'm still happy with that decision. And I'm also grateful to Jacob Buur, Horst Günther Ruban, and all my other colleagues at SDU for the opportunities and experiences in the south of Denmark. And then it was also actually a very special experience to be supervising my first PhD student at the time, Agnieszka Radziwon, who has become an important collaborator and frequent co-author. Then, the next step before coming back to Eindhoven was to start an associate professor position at the University of Copenhagen. Actually, to be honest, I initially applied for a full professor position, which they didn't want to give me at the time, yet. I, of course, disagreed with that at the time, but I could later understand their arguments. And in fact, it taught me a valuable lesson that it's not always necessary or even good to rush too much with your career. I actually see quite many people eagerly chasing the next promotion and the next one, but to some extent I now think it is beyond the point. I've come to realize that it's much more important to follow your passion, and when you focus on the process, good things will come your way. It's kind of like an open innovation process model, which will work as long as you have the right mindset and business model. In my case, at least, it worked out in the end, as I got that professor position after a few years anyway. Well, there are so many people to thank in Copenhagen that I don't think we would ever make it on time for the reception. So let me just give a big tusen tak to all the fine people I had the opportunity to work with there. To still highlight a few names from the department I worked at, special word of thanks go to Henrik and Bo as heads of department, and Jesper and the other Jesper for their support throughout the years. I have to say that this was also the place where I learned that having great support and administrative staff really makes all the difference in the world, and I would like to thank them for that as well. Big thanks also to my colleagues from the section, and especially in the research group I worked, Nico, Karen, Elena, Ming, Maral, Dagim, Sunny, and Gergana, and later Gita and Thijs, and also the many great visiting PhD students I had the pleasure to host. And I cannot forget Timo Minsen and the whole team at the Siebel Center for a very inspiring collaboration. Finally, I would also like to acknowledge the financial support from the Novo Nordisk Foundation and the Carlsberg Foundation, and I would like to thank them for believing in my research, because it really made a difference. Throughout the years, I have, of course, built up a large network with many great colleagues. I even tried to create an overview of my co-authors, but had to give up at some point. I do want to say that I could have never gotten where I am now if it wasn't for all those smart people out there that I worked with. So big, big thanks for that. But if I then have to thank one person individually, it would be Henry Chesbrough, who has been a great role model in many different ways. Not only as a co-author, but as a mentor and, quite frankly, as a person as well. Through him, I learned that open and collaborative innovation is not just a topic you can study, but also something you can actually apply in practice. So big thanks to Henry and to the other colleagues from the Garwood Center as well, with whom I had the pleasure to help organize the World Open Innovation Conference, to be hosted this year here in Eindhoven. And since I took over from Henry as conference chair, it has been a great and admittedly challenging experience to help grow the open innovation community, or even family, as some would call it. I'm therefore extremely grateful to the entire organizing team. I hope you will forgive me for not mentioning all of your names, but please know that your contribution means a lot to me personally, and more importantly, to the entire community. Well, with this, I'm finally making the transition to where I am now, back here at the TUE. For me, this is of course, for this I'm of course grateful to the executive board and the departmental board for actually hiring me. I do especially want to thank also our president, Robert Jan Smits, for his openness in sharing ideas and experiences, and for promoting the importance of our local ecosystem in many different ways. In a way, I feel we are on this journey together. I also want to thank our Dean, Ingrid Heinrichs, and Vice Dean Geert-Jan van Houten for all the constructive discussions we've had. In our group, I first of all want to thank Sjoerd Romme for his support and advice, and the same goes for my fellow professors, Fred Langerak and Ed Nijssen. And especially Isabel Rijmen, with whom I feel we are somehow on a similar mission. I also feel very fortunate for having so many great colleagues in the group. Of course, also too many to mention now. But I'm extremely excited to be working on the projects we already acquired and to develop new ones as well, of course. So thank you all for your support, your hard work, and your inspiration. Given that we are in a great ecosystem, it is really impossible to thank everyone else I would like to thank. But let me then anyway mention Jeroen van Woerden of The Gate and the colleagues from Eindhoven Engine, like Maarten Steinburg, Katja Panke, Paul de Smet, and Walter Baats. I would also like to thank Clement Goossens and Hannie Strauss for their help with getting our conference off the ground, and big thanks to our sponsors as well, of course. The only person I will thank twice is actually Clement, because in my view, he goes beyond and above supporting some of our ideas and initiatives. So I would like to say that is really, really very much appreciated, and it does make a big difference. I have to say that also the support of what I believe we now call the Research Support Network is very important to me. And because there are so many functions and people involved, I'm really afraid I would miss a name. So I won't mention anyone, as I may risk offending somebody I don't mention and still need their help. But I would like to thank them also very much for their support and looking forward in collaborating in the future. Finally, looking further into the region, it has been a pleasure to be in touch with so many people already. But a special word of thanks goes to the people from Brainport Development, such as Paul van Nuenen, Naomi Verstraeten, Kevin van Lierop, Daniela Garant, and Wim de Kinderen. In addition, I cannot conclude before thanking all-time friend Michiel Pieters for his continuous support as well. Now I'm really coming to an end. And there's no better way to close the lecture by thanking the people I love most. This starts, of course, with my parents. Thank you for always being there for me, including the many times I fell and you needed to help me get up. Or rather, as you can see in the video, perhaps it was my dad who was always pushing me and my mom was there to comfort me. And big thanks to my little brother. I'm happy to be finally living a little bit closer to home. I have to say that the support of my family has been invaluable to me. And I'm really happy that this extended to my family-in-law as well. Dank jullie wel. And then, my own beautiful family. And first and foremost, my sweet wife, Hanneke. I want you to know that I could have never gotten to where I am now without your endless support. So thank you for that. I think it's fair to say that we have been on quite a journey in life together already, but I'm sure the best is yet to come. And then my boys. What can I say to you guys? I'm so happy that you have been part of my journey in life so far. And I can't wait to see where your own lives will take you in the future. I want you to know that everything I do, including wearing these funny clothes, is to create a better future for you. At the same time, I think we're all experiencing that life isn't always easy. And that being open and collaborative is often easier said than done. Therefore, to conclude, I want to say to my boys and to all of you that whether you want to learn how to plan your homework better, not mentioning any names, whether you want to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube, whether you need to work on going to bed on time, or whether you're planning to run a marathon, say the day after tomorrow here in Eindhoven, or whether you want to tackle societal challenges through open and collaborative innovation, if you work hard, if you work smart, and if we work together, we can make it to the finish line. Ik heb gezegd.